What's up, guys? We're starting a new chapter. We're starting with reproduction. But before we start, if you think the channel's helpful, if you think the channel's good, please share it with other people. Share it with your classmates. Share it with your Telegram groups. I would really appreciate that. Now, what is reproduction? What do we mean by reproduction? Now, reproduction is simply producing new individuals similar to the parent. Okay, that's what reproduction is. So we reproduce, we make new individuals that is similar to us. So all organisms must reproduce or produce new individuals similar to itself to preserve the species. Organisms don't need reproduction to survive, but they need it for continuity of their generations. So what does that mean? Meaning, let's say that I'm a man right now, and I don't have children. Would that affect me? Would that affect my health? Not necessarily. That's not going to do anything. If I live my whole life as an old man, I've never had children in my life, that still wouldn't affect my health. That still wouldn't do anything to me. But if all men or women, if all humans stop reproducing, this ultimately is going to lead to extinction. The species is going to disappear. So reproduction isn't necessary at the individual level, but is necessary for the survival of the species as a whole. Reproduction differs from other life activities like digestion, aka eating, respiration, aka breathing, circulation, excretion, as these functions are essential for an organism's survival. In contrast, reproduction is not necessary for an individual's survival, so you don't need to do this activity in order to survive as an individual, but we need it to survive as a whole. An organism may be unable to reproduce or lack fully developed reproductive organs, yet still maintain a healthy body and continue living. So some individuals actually lack reproductive organs, maybe due to a disease, maybe due to a malformation, but they still can live a normal life. Any organism without functional reproductive organs cannot continue its generation and will eventually disappear. Here we can have really creative, cool questions telling you to justify or explain that reproduction is not essential for the survival of an individual organism, or they can tell you to justify that reproduction is essential for the survival of the species, but not the individual organism, or they can tell you to justify that reproduction is not essential for the survival of an individual, but is essential for the continuation of the species. And the answer is, we've talked about it already. We're just going to say that it is not necessary for an individual, but it is necessary as a whole, because reproduction differs from other life activities, and an individual does not need reproduction in order to survive. But the organism as a whole, if they stop reproducing, this will lead to extinction. Here they're telling you to justify or explain that reproduction differs from other life activities like digestion and respiration. And we're just going to say that reproduction differs from other life activities like digestion and respiration because these functions are essential for the organism's survival. In contrast, reproduction is not necessary for an individual's survival. An organism may be unable to reproduce or lack fully developed reproductive organs, yet still maintain a healthy body and continue living. And of course, any organism without functional reproductive organs cannot continue its generation and will eventually disappear. You can have blank questions here telling you that blank differs from other life activities like digestion, respiration, circulation, and excretion, and that it is not essential for the individual survival. It's very clear that we're talking about reproduction, and it's actually possible to have questions like that because we have a whole chapter talking about reproduction. Another blank question is telling you that blank means production of new individuals approximately similar to parent, and of course, we're talking about reproduction. We're describing the reproduction here. Now, of course, we have two types of reproduction. We have sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. The sexual reproduction is seen in multicellular eukaryotes like animals and plants. Animals including humans, of course, meaning multicellular eukaryotes, meaning the advanced, the more evolved organisms, because sexual reproduction is considered a complex process. Meanwhile, the asexual reproduction is performed by primitive organisms like unicellular prokaryotes like bacteria. So they can actually tell you to give an example for each of the following, and they're telling you organism that produced by means of sexual reproduction, and it's going to be most multicellular eukaryotes like animals and plants. And if they tell you that to give an example of an organism that reproduced by means of asexual reproduction, that's going to be primitive organisms. Okay, the less evolved organisms like unicellular prokaryotes, like what? Like bacteria. Sexual reproduction is a more complicated process than asexual reproduction, as I told you. But both types of reproduction have two main states or principles or aspects. So here they can ask you, like, what are the main principles or aspects or states of both sexual and asexual reproduction? And the answer is these two items. You're just going to say that the collection of pure substances from the environment and their transmission to the next generation. 2, the transmission of genetic material, which is the DNA, to the next generation. So what does that mean? Collection of pure substances from the environment and their transmission to the next generation. It means that organisms can gather raw materials like nutrients, water, minerals, etc. from their environment and then use those substances to build their own bodies, like the cells and molecules. For example, proteins, lipids. And then we can pass them to the next generation, either through sexual or asexual reproduction. For example, in humans, the food that we eat becomes part of us and ultimately contributes to the formation of sperm or eggs, which are passed to our children. And then they're telling you that the transmission of genetic material to the next generation, that's basically the whole idea of reproduction. We're transferring our genetic material, our DNA, to the offspring. And the new individual is going to have half chromosomes, which are made up of DNA, from the father, and half of the chromosomes coming from the mother. In certain animal populations, reproduction is carried out by only a small number of individuals. For example, in a beehive, most bees are sterile female workers with no role in reproduction. But the drones, aka the male bees, are capable of reproduction but are fewer in number. While only one female, the queen, is responsible for reproduction. So here you can also have, like, give an example for each of the following, telling you an animal population where only a small number of individuals are involved in reproduction. And we're just going to say bees. Maybe a blank question or another given example question asking you about which female is responsible for the reproduction in the beehive or the bees, and it's going to be the queen. But most female workers have no role in reproduction. You can have a blank question telling you that there are two main types of reproduction, blank and blank. They're going to be sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. The asexual reproduction, so some organisms can generate new individuals by breaking off a part of their body, which then develops into an independent organism. And this type of reproduction can result in the formation of one or more new organisms. This is similar to amitosis, the binary fission we've discussed earlier in the first chapter. This is the whole concept of the asexual reproduction. So a cell divides and then make up two cells. But in the sexual reproduction, we're having way too many complex stuff going on. So in the sexual reproduction, Most plants and large number of animals are characterized by having distinct male and female members. So we're going to have the males that are going to produce the sperm, and the females are going to produce the eggs, or the ova, which is the plural of ovum. And these organisms differ in their anatomy, physical characteristics, and the structure of their reproductive organs. So the characteristic of sexual reproduction is basically having two distinct sexes. So we're having male and female, male producing the sperm and the female producing the ova. The sexual reproduction occurs through the union of male and female reproductive cells in a process called fertilization. So this is also can be a blank question here. You can have a question asking you like, sexual reproduction passes through two main steps, explain them. So in the first step, the cell undergoes meiosis. We've discussed this in the first chapter. We said that meiosis is specifically for reproductive cells, for gametes. They're not for the body cells. So the cell will undergo meiosis, and this will reduce the chromosome number so that the resulting cell receives half of the original chromosome. So it's going to be 1N. In the second step, two gametes unite in a process called fertilization, forming a zygote. Okay, we call it a zygote. So sperm plus egg is going to form the zygote, which is 2N, with a full form of chromosome number. This zygote then grows into a new organism through a series of mitotic divisions. So after we form the zygote, this zygote will go through mitosis, not meiosis anymore. So it's just going to be mitosis to increase in number. Of course, you can have a question telling you to compare the sexual and asexual reproduction. We've already discussed everything. We said that in sexual reproduction, it occurs in more advanced organisms like animals and plants, but in asexual, they occur in primitive organisms like the unicellular prokaryotes, like bacteria. And of course, the sexual reproduction happens through the union of male and female reproductive cells in a process we call fertilization. So we need two distinct sexes, we need male and female. Meanwhile, in the asexual reproduction, we don't really need this concept. We're just going to say, okay, it happens when an organism generates a new individual by breaking off a part of their body, which then develops into an independent organism. And in sexual reproduction, the new organism formed have traits from both parents. Meanwhile, in the asexual, the new organism formed have identical traits from their parent. So here we can just say that the traits are from both parents, so both parents contribute to the traits of the new individual. But here, we're going to have identical 100% from that one single parent. And in sexual reproduction, we're going to say that it is a complex process, but here it's a simple process. And of course, sexual reproduction, example, occur in humans. And here the example, like binary fission bacteria.